Hey, this is Aaron, OSU Water Polo here from YourGameSource.com, and I'm getting ready to interview Joe Renato of the new 8-Bit Heroes. I can see you talking, I cannot hear you. Okay. I still cannot hear you. I hear nothing.
If I do this, you should probably be able to hear me.
Yes, now I can hear you.
But you don't have my cool microphone now. See, I got this fancy microphone, but that's not getting audio to you right now.
Oh,
Now it's just my computer monitor microphone. That's not as much fun.
no. Well, that's all I have, so.
Yeah. Give me one more second. I'm gonna see what's going on. Such a project. Technology's supposed to make things easier.
Once you absolutely master them, yes, but it takes 3 times longer to master it than to do it the first time.
Right. Let me open. Let's try and do it through Soundflower. Let's see if it likes that. It's been very complicated because I've actually been doing some of these potentially for the video, like with the guys, from Shovel Knight and stuff like that, having the same issues. Okay. What a pain. It's not supposed to be that difficult. Okay, let's see if this will work. Okay. Do you hear me at all now?
Yes, I do.
Okay, let me try this.
No. Nothing.
All right, screw it. We'll just do it the crappy way.
Okay, that works for me.
No problem. I've got this beautiful recording studio, and it seems like it doesn't really matter. You're right now. I'm talking to you through the hub of the studio, so you don't see its epicness, but it's all around you.
I can believe that.
So yeah, man, thanks for inviting me to chat about this.
No problem. We were just talking with Rob at the Classic Gaming Expo, and he mentioned you, and it was like, hey, that's something we're interested in, and so I'm glad he made an introduction for us.
Yeah, I really wanted to try and get out to that. That would have been perfect, but alas, that was not in the cards. Vegas is a little bit of a long trip, but yes. Hoping, we've been talking for a while. I've been online with him for about 2 years. I was doing another sort of related project to this, and I met him then. And when this project came up, he's like, "Dude, yes, we need to coordinate on this." To the point where he's almost been like another member of the team because he's like so into the project. He says it's like the logical successor of the spiritual successor of his project. His is about the games that were, and ours is about the games that will be. That kind of thing.
Yeah.
So we have this vision where we're going to come out to California, and there's definitely going to have to be a whiskey drinking drive through the desert from LA to Las Vegas while blasting Queens of the Stone Age and Bark Market. So it's in the cards.
Well, there's nothing better to do on that drive. Hate it.
Oh, I've done it a couple of times. I used to tour with a rock band, and we did that stretch a couple of times. In the middle of the heat waves of August and whatnot. It was not fun. A car with no air conditioning,
That would be miserable. I mean, I've done it for conventions or to hit up Disney with family or something, but
sure.
Oh man, that can get horrible.
Yeah, definitely.
I will never go to a convention in August again. I'm so glad they rescheduled it to October, November timeframe.
Seriously.
The one I normally go to.
Seriously. Yeah, man. So tell me about your podcast, man. What's the deal with this show?
Basically, I just like interview people and let you guys talk about what you want.
All right.
I try and ask engaging questions to so that it doesn't sound like you're just talking into a microphone.
Sure.
I don't really have my own podcast. Some of the other ones do. I personally hate the sound of my own voice, so
Okay.
I don't. But I tend to be like on our side. I review, like the Kemco makes these old school 8-bit to PlayStation era RPGs, and I tend to review those when they come out every month for the site. So I mean, the classic thing kind of gets thrown on me whenever anything comes up because that's something that I kind of do. But I mean, I'd interview somebody from Halo even though I hate the franchise.
You're right.
That's what they tell me to do. I'm going to go do it.
I would totally sit down on a lecture with Michael Bay, even though I hate Michael Bay films.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sure he'd give you some really great insight into
what not to do. What
Yeah.
not to do. Exactly.
Don't ruin classic cartoon
Yeah.
shows.
Yeah, well, you know what I'm scared of? He's going to get through these classic cartoon shows and then turn his attention to like classic films.
Yeah.
So like since he's got the budget, he'll remake Raiders of the Lost Ark or something, like, he will be assassinated. It will be terrible.
Yeah.
I'll feel bad because
It'll still do well in
theaters,
theaters, though,
which will only
make
prompt
it
more.
worse.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so that'll be a scary thing.
Exactly.
So, my understanding of your project is you sometime in the past wanted to do like a Zelda documentary type thing on Kickstarter, and that failed.
Right.
And so this kind of came out because of that, mixed with you finding stuff in your parents' storage. And so the Kickstarter that you're doing now is kind of a cross between how the old Kickstarter failed, how you went about finding, this one, making a game for the NES. It's also going to have cross-platform functionality with, I'm guessing PC. I haven't exactly found anything, but cross-functionality with some other game, and the two games are going to talk back and forth between the NES and the.
That's a pretty close summation.
Okay.
I
just want to make sure I'm on the right track.
You're totally on the right track. Let me give you a little bit more reference. So basically, with the Zelda documentary, how that came about was me and another filmmaker. When I was living in Baltimore, me and another filmmaker there, we were on a shoot for a feature film, and it was a breakneck pace film. It was like 8 days to shoot, 100-page script, and it was insane. And I was audio teching, and he was sort of a second camera, and the second unit camera. And we would break from like 12, 13-hour days, and we were tired, but we couldn't go to sleep, and we were just so pissed off and angry about the process because like the director wasn't getting along with the cinematographer, and all kinds of chaos. The actors didn't have chemistry and whatever. So we would come home and we had our this is 2009, I think. We had the Wii set up, and we would rock old school NES games on through the shop, the eShop, and we downloaded Zelda 2 because I'd said it's weird. I'm a huge Zelda nerd, but I have never beat Zelda 2 in my entire life. I played it as a kid and just moved on from it and never beat it. He's like, me too. So neither of us had ever beat it. So we started. We downloaded it and we just made it a mission. Before the film was done being shot, we were gonna beat Zelda 2, and we over the course of that we were remembering parts of the game and stuff like that. Well, we didn't grow up together. I mean, he grew up in California, I grew up in New York, and we realized we had this really bizarro sort of shared experience. It was as if we had shared this experience, even though we didn't meet for another decade after that, And we found that really interesting. And we're like, that's probably a story with a lot of creatives, a lot of other people that have played these games, and we were, jokingly said, yeah, I wonder how many celebrities, and I want, it's only a generation away from, the president of the United States having been a big Zelda fan, and we, made a big joke, and we said, that might be a really interesting idea for a documentary. Maybe we do a documentary on not the games themselves, but sort of like the influence that they've had and the creative projects that are coming out now that are inspiring a whole new generation, and how they had their roots and inspiration in the NES era Zelda games. And we met a lot of people like the guy who writes the film, the Goldbergs. He also had a hand in writing a lot of episodes of Community, How to Train Your Dragon, Fanboys, a bunch of other stuff. He was like hugely inspired by the Legend of Zelda franchise, and he's a big Hollywood filmmaker now. And we found musicians, and we found professional published authors, and so it was a really cool idea for a documentary, and we put it out there. And years later, when I had no project, I just moved to Sarasota, and I was like, I want to do a project, but man, I don't know too many people in Sarasota to make a film yet. How about a documentary? Ooh, I got an idea. I'll pull out this Zelda IP. This is a cool idea. And so I put it up on Kickstarter and got some really good support from a lot of the community, and then support just kind of died midway into the campaign and never picked up again. And I don't really know why, and no one else really knows why. It just is something that just sort of happened. So that kind of got put on the back burner, and I've been chipping away at it whenever I can. I've been, going this place, whenever travel budget could allow me to work on it. But it hasn't really seen a big increase in, so there's only so much I can do on personal budget. And while I was working on that project, I went out to my tool shed at my parents' house while I was visiting them for the holidays. And it was a miserable snowstorm. It was beautiful for video purposes. And I went out there and to find all my old Nintendo stuff, all my old NES stuff, because I thought that'd make for cool for the Zelda documentary. And when I was out there, I found these old illustrations I'd done at like 7, 8 years old for this game called Mystic Searches that I created when I was a kid, and I brought them back to Florida with me, and just as on a whim, and it just kind of ate away at me like, I'm a programmer now. I could probably learn assembly enough to actually make this game. And so I spent about 6 months toying around with assembly language and learning how exactly how the NES was programmed and all the idiosyncrasies of the console. And I said, maybe this would make a really interesting documentary, not just me making this game, but what if I know so many people who are professional creatives. I know comic illustrators and published novelists and graphic designers at major studios and things like that. What if I gathered a group of modern creatives and that are all really good at their craft and can demonstrate, proficiency in their craft, but then had them retrofit their games, their skills to make an 8-bit NES game, and just to show the challenge of making that game and how you can still make a compelling experience for a player even within those limitations and things like that. And so I talked to the group of creatives about it, and everyone was super psyched. And I talked to a couple people in the gaming industry and the people at NESdev and Nintendo Age, and they were super psyched. So I said, all right, well, I'll tell you what, we'll put it out there. We'll see if there's interest, and if there is, we'll do a Kickstarter. So I put a little feeler video out there, and like 500 people liked the feeler video. I was like, okay, let's do this thing. Sure. We didn't even promote that video; just kind of went minorly viral. And so we said, okay, yeah, let's do this thing, and launched Kickstarter, and that leads us to now.
Yep.
So you were pretty close. You just needed a little bit more backstory.
Well, yeah. I mean, I could only get so much searching the internet, whereas you have it all stored in your brain already.
Right. And I've only told the story 5,000 times now in the last 2 weeks.
Well, yeah.
So it's very rehearsed at this point. As far as the game being playable, we thought that was something that I've always thought of for the last 15 years. I thought that ever since, people started playing games on their PCs and web games started to become popular and things like that, I said, wouldn't it be cool if you had an 8-bit NES game that also could do XYZ? I think that idea first came to me back at like the turn of the millennium. I was touring with a rock band, and we had this idea, let's make a game for promotion. And people can play the game, and if they beat a level, it unlocks a song off of an unreleased album. And so they beat all 12 levels, and they have a whole new album. Wouldn't that be awesome, So we toyed around. We made a NES-like game at that time And, but that was the root of it. We always thought that was kind of a cool thing. And so when I started to make this project, I said, not everyone has an NES and not everyone likes that aesthetic. What about the people that would be interested in the game but want a different way to play it, or, and we said, well, wouldn't it be neat anyway to have like a multi-platform game, like show why the NES game was so cool and show, almost like the evolution of it and where it would be if it was made for today's console, or, at least iOS device or something like that, a modern day game. And so we started to mess around and we talked to a bunch of people about the possibility. I've got a hardware developer that's actually on the team. We talked to a couple guys who have done like flash carts that take like SD cards. You can load ROMs to them and play them on NES and stuff like that. And we talked about the possibility, and they were super jazzed. They're like, oh, this would totally be possible. And we started to look into ways. And once we ascertained that, yes, this is possible, we're like, okay, we are definitely doing that. That is definitely part of this project, because we couldn't think of, and even the people at like Nintendo Age, we couldn't think of anybody who's done anything like that. And it seems like all the retro gamers, they all think they all geek out over it. It's like, that'd be so cool. We're like, yeah, right? Okay. Some people don't get it, but like the classic gamers, they totally get it. They're like, that'd be so neat. So that's kind of how that came about.
Yeah. I mean, that's going to be cool to see the 8-bit version, and then are you just going to jump to like current day stuff, or is it going to be a slow transition, or is that still talking about?
That's still talking about, and
okay.
I mean, it really depends on how much funds we raise. There was a conversation that was had that was really funny. Like, and it was by one of the people who's not a gamer. It was either the novelist or graphic designer, and they said, "Wow, you should make a version of this game for all of the Nintendo platforms, for Nintendo, Super Nintendo, Nintendo 64." And we're all like, "Yeah, we should. That would be awesome." And they were like, "Let's stick to one thing at a time, though." But yeah, the conversation has gone back and forth between like, we could do a 3D based game. We know a lot of modelers and animators and illustrators and people who can rig and things like that. So, we talked about going that direction, and that has pros and cons. It would never look like a AAA title, which is one of the cons. It would never look like a AAA PC game.
Yeah.
So that's one thing that we've considered. Like, people like modern gamers would hear modern gamer and see that and be like, well, this sucks. Like they wouldn't get it. So it would almost ruin that part of it. But if we did a really intense pixel experience that only a modern console can do, like an NES, you're limited to 3 colors on a sprite, really. You can cheat and have overlays, but then that leads to problems too. But anyway, you're really limited as far as color palette and how much memory the game can hold and stuff like that. But, if you did a modern pixel-based game, you could do all kinds of all kinds of effects that you couldn't do. You could do parallax scrolling. You could have virtually infinite amount of memory and things that have happened in the game. You could have particle effects. You could have any size sprite graphics that you wanted. And so we talked about doing like another pixel art version of the game or something in that world, but just much more advanced, like much more in depth. So that's part of the conversation too. And then there was the conversation, well, let's do both. Let's have one where you can play in classic mode or 3D mode, and they're playing together. And I'm like, that would be awesome. But if we get $100,000, sure, we can hire out a team to do that part of it. But yeah, so it all is going to depend on the budget that comes in, what we can do.
Oh, yeah, I've seen the Kickstarter page, and the first, I think it was like after 2 days, you're already halfway there. So that's almost always a good sign.
Yeah. Well, it's running like every Kickstarter campaign. The first couple of days were awesome. I think we made almost $9,000 in 24 hours, and we were at $24,000 within a week. Or something like that, 22,000, something like that within a week. I actually have it written down here somewhere. But then it starts to taper off, and now you're seeing, $1,000 will come in on a day or whatever. And it's not a matter of interest, it's just a matter of visibility. We have reached the extent of our immediate pool of NES fans and retro gaming fans, And as it reaches more, like when, Retro Magazine just did a real short blurb, and all of a sudden $1,000 came in, like lots of people pledged. So like when there's a new sort of pool of people tapped, then we get more bites, but we tapped so much at the beginning that now that's starting to slow down. But even at this pace, even if it didn't pick back up, we're in plenty good shape to see this funded. And always that last week of a Kickstarter is big as well.
Yeah.
So, we're not worried about it. We're just making sure to stay very diligent with trying to get the word, spread further.
Yeah, that's what we're here, hopefully, to help a little bit with that.
Yeah, man, we definitely appreciate it.
Hey, we appreciate you taking your time out to talk with us as well.
I should be working on a prototype right now, just to let you know. So if people want to see a prototype on the Kickstarter, you're the one that's going to have to answer to them, my friend.
Uh-oh. I haven't said my name yet. I'm hiding. So, how... oh, man.
So many questions.
Yeah, so many questions. So many wrong questions as well.
Oh, that's fine. Ask them. Go shoot. Rapid fire.
I think everybody wants to know, what is the arcade machine behind you?
Ah, my main machine. Yeah. Okay, so there's a cool story behind this machine. So I've got actually my gaming room sort of set up in the other room. This is actually the living room of my home. And my house has 2 living rooms, and my wife got one and I got the other. That was kind of the deal that we made. So my living room is sort of the awesome media suite, like with my right up there. Usually I would have you up there on my giant TV on the wall, and I've got my workstation right here that this monitor's on top of, and I've got my piano over here, and I got my guitars on the wall, and I wanted a stand-up arcade machine, and part of it was I want my kids to know what that is. That might disappear by the time my kids are old enough to know what it is. I want them to really know and experience playing an arcade game. I thought about getting an actual, Frogger machine or, Space Invaders machine or something like that. And so I was looking online, and then I thought of this great idea where I was going to get a cabinet and house all my consoles underneath and have like a switch box so I could have an old CRT monitor and hook it all up. That was my big plan. I was going to make this, weird Frankensteinian console MAME cabinet machine thing. And so I started looking for cabinets. And the cabinets were like $300, and I had to drive 2 hours to go pick it up. And it's like, yeah, maybe I should build one. And I was hemming and hawing. And ironically, we had just moved into this house when this happened. I looked on Craigslist, and I'd been looking on Craigslist for a year, and I hadn't found anything. And we just moved into this house. I looked on Craigslist, and literally walking distance from my house, there was a guy selling a MAME cabinet. And I literally could have put it on a scooter and, rolled it to my house and moved it in. So it was actually the first thing that was in this house. That cabinet was the first thing that was in this house. There was no furniture. I think my bed was in here and that cabinet. And it's got, it's just a MAME machine. It's a PC brain in there, but it's got like 7,000 games on there. So from old arcade machines all the way to, Nintendo 64 games on there. Yeah. So whenever, when we have a production meeting or when we have a Christmas party or even at our rehearsal dinner for our wedding, which we had at the house, my wife and her bridesmaid were playing Mortal Kombat on the night of our rehearsal dinner for the wedding. So that, I've got a picture of it. They're all in these, sleek, sexy dresses, and I'm in this nice, this nice shirt, and I took a picture, and it was just like, this is what these are supposed to look like. This is exactly correct. So yeah, so that's the main machine. That's that. I got all kinds of toys in this house.
That's always how it should be.
Yeah.
So I've seen, the Kickstarter page and the game and kind of exploration. Is there anything you can tell us about how the game, at least how you envisioned the game as a kid? Maybe not the direction it's going now.
Right, and this is a really tough challenge for us right now because one of the things is it's still in this sort of concept phase where we could roll with the concepts that we have right now, but the whole idea is we want to have a 1-year life cycle. That's sort of part of the novelty of doing it the way that we're doing, which is insane, by the way. If you go to any of the homebrew sites, one of the things that they are criticizing about this campaign is not the idea behind it, or not they're really excited for that, but you're not going to make it in a year, just to let you know. There's no way. It's about, and fortunately, we've got a lot of support from some of the people that pretty much run the NES dev site. I already have a running start because I've already been building engines and things like that. So anyway, but because of that, we can't paint ourselves into a corner. We don't want to, and I don't want to show the engines that I've built because people don't understand that. Like, people don't get what they're looking at is not like a finished game. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I've got engines on. If you go to thezeldamovie.com from a computer, there's actually a playable game there, a playable, very Zelda-like game on there. So when I set out to do this project, I just used the same sprites and sort of modified them so I could use them on hardware NES and use those to make, to start building an engine and start, programming controller input and start controlling a coordinate map system and starting to control sound and collision detection and a random number generator and palette cycling for animation effects and all those kinds of things like that I wanted to make sure that I knew how to do before I said, yes, okay, this is a project I'm going to do. So if I were to show that now, everyone would have a completely warped sense of what this game is going to look like in the end. So while some of the mechanics are similar, I don't want to show it because I think people wouldn't quite understand that this is not what the game will look like, or they'll get the game and say, "Hey, the game was supposed to look like this," and So I've avoided very purposefully showing more of the actual game. But as far as what the game was envisioned, when I was a kid, it was very. I was 7 years old. I only had so many influences coming, at me. And so a lot of the game was very derivative of those influences at the time. There you saw a ton of Legend of Zelda references, a ton of the first Dragon Warrior, the first Final Fantasy game. Like, these were the games that I was sort of tapping to create this epic fantasy world, Well, something weird happened over the next 30 years. The seeds of those ideas, which got scrapped, ended up evolving, and they evolved into, a couple short stories I wrote when I was, 9, and then they evolved again, and I started to, I had this program called HyperCard for old Mac Plus, those old little gray Macintoshes, and I built a point-and-click adventure game out of it, but it was, more advanced from those ideas. And then when I was in my teens, I kind of I expanded upon those ideas, and I started to build this novel universe, and it was kind of less traditional fantasy and kind of morphed into something else. And when I was 19, I kind of revisited that world and put different spins on it. And then in my 20s, I wrote something I was really proud of for a fiction class that kind of was an evolution of that. And then even, up to last year, I actually finished my first novel last year, and it's still got seeds in those original ideas if you really know what you're looking for. But it's totally different at this point. So now I find these old design documents that were kind of the seeds for this idea, and I'm like, wow, it's evolved so far. What kind of game are we making? Are we making a game like when I was 7, or are we taking bits and pieces from this evolution of where it's come to till now, these ideas? And so we're really playing with a lot of that from a narrative perspective, and we've decided to sort of that's why I brought in a narrative developer to sort of put a cushion between me and the sort of story that's being told, because she'll have all kinds of fresh ideas, and I think that's a really neat thing, and I can kind of be the programmer to help see those ideas realized. I give her sort of these broad strokes, and then she fills in the details with the concept artist, and it creates this really cool collaborative sort of story. So that's kind of about the narrative. As far as the mechanics of the game, I think what you're going to see is people are going to compare like an action adventure, like a Legend of Zelda game. It's going to have intermixed some RPG elements, experience system, things like that. But primarily, it's going to be sort of a quicker paced. It's not going to have like turn-based battle systems or anything like that. It's going to be more of a quicker paced adventure game. I don't know if that answers any of that question at all, that long diatribe of a response.
That would be even if I remembered the question at this point. No.
yeah, right.
Crap, I had a question and then I forgot.
Oh, sorry.
Dang it. Oh, I'm going blonde. I really should have written these down. I'm
It's
getting
all good,
really
man.
bad at that. That's what happens with old age.
I'm drinking wine. I'll just keep drinking until it all makes sense.
You might end that.
There we go.
Um, you answered. I had two questions, and you answered one of them, which was going to be, what genre would you define the game as?
Right.
Oh, you had said, a year production.
Yeah.
From the end of the Kickstarter, and then an exact year later is the 30th anniversary of the NES coming out in the States.
That is correct.
And I that is amazing planning on your part. I'm so glad that somebody is thinking of doing a cool project.
Can I tell you a secret?
Go for it.
Totally a coincidence.
Oh, cool.
It started. Well, yeah. No, we we decided that we were going to start the Kickstarter in mid-September, run through October. That gave us enough time to do what we wanted to do, prepare for the Kickstarter, and we did not want to run into the holidays. Once we get to the holidays, forget it. We're not going to try and do a Kickstarter over the holidays. No one's paying attention. Right. No, no one's paying attention. There's just so many other things to worry about. And so we said, okay, like September would be a great time. People are going back to school. Everyone's talking about new things. And okay, that'd be fun. That'd be a good time to do it. And then the realization struck me. I said, the 30th anniversary of the NES is coming out. I wonder when that, we're going to run September 15th to October 15th. And sure enough, October 18th is the 30th anniversary. So I said, okay, let's just run the campaign till the 17th and then give ourselves a 1 year production timeline. And it'll run it'll run from the 17th to the 17th. We hold the game in our hand on the 18th and put it in the NES for the first time, and there you go. There's our game, and that's kind of, it is really ambitious to a ridiculous degree to make a NES game in that time, let alone make two games that talk to each other and all that, and a documentary about it and a set of tutorials about them and all that stuff. And fortunately, we have a lot of people who are investing a lot of their energy and time in the project for peanuts, because they're really passionate. It's nobody on the team is this their primary source of income. This is a passion project for everybody who's involved. So that also allows us to involve other people who are passionate about the project too. We're not really limited to a team, and we pay people as we go, what we can, where we need to. But everyone is pretty much like, dude, whatever needs to get done, let's get this done. It's going to be awesome. So the money's going into, just to cover the production costs of the deliverables alone is going to be pretty expensive. You can't get a run of less than 1,000 DVDs or Blu-rays. You have to hand make the cartridges, so it's like if we have 300 people who end up wanting NES games, we have to hand make 300 cartridges for them, so we might have to hire people to be in our sweatshop for a couple of weeks to put games together, but yeah, so that's the plan, a year development cycle so that it aligns with the 30th anniversary of the NES. We just thought that was novel. We thought that was cool. So it's still alive after 30 years. And there's something with the Konami code too, giving you 30 extra lives. And there was talk about a shirt that was like that or something. I don't know.
Yeah. So speaking of the NES cartridge itself,
yep.
How are you going to release the game to people? Is there going to be a version for, maybe a 15-year-old who doesn't have an NES because his parents weren't gamers? Right. Is he going to be able to play both versions of the game, or is he going to have to go grab an NES for this?
My hope, and I'm saying this with the big asterisks of, let's keep our fingers crossed that this all works out the way that we want, but I have a feeling that on the cartridge, we're also going to have a ROM of the game. So it can function also as an external hard drive if you want to play it through an emulator. It's not as much fun. We're going to encourage people to actually get an NES and play it on the TV and, whatever. But we're hoping to make it so that the ROM can talk to the same data structure as the actual physical cartridge could. And if not, they will definitely at least be able to play the modern game. So let's hope that all works out. I'm sure once the game's released, people are going to spread the ROM like wildfire. There's nothing you can do about that right now. There's that level of sort of piracy spreading around. And we're just hoping that people are cool and support the actual project and want the physical cartridge. we're not in it to make $1 million. We just want to cover our costs. So that's why Kickstarter is a great way to do it, because then it covers our costs. We make the game. The game's out in the world. At that point, if people want it and spread it, it's no big loss to us. We don't count on this as income. So just that's another reason that we like Kickstarter for this project.
Yeah, it's great. You get all your costs done ahead of time, and then anything you make in the end, you can reinvest into
next game or
project,
the Super Nintendo version.
Yeah, exactly. you can just keep building on it and make it a 5 or 10 year game cycle, which is not unusual in the industry. But you guys you can make it more episodic almost. So
right.
That would kind of be cool to see the evolution of that over.
Well, and it's weird too, and this is kind of a weird thought. You mentioned episodic. NES games are shorter by default because they can only hold so much memory. We're looking at the MMC1 mapper, and the MMC1 mapper, which is the memory control, basically the memory controller. So you can only load 32 kilobits of data at one time into the NES, and you can only hold with the MMC1 200 at max 256 kilobits of data. So that's it. That's all you get for one game. And so, that's like a large, text file. That's it's ridiculous how little data that is. So making something that would be episodical would be really neat. A game that doesn't necessarily end is like a trilogy, and it's actually 3 cartridges long, and that way the gameplay sort of extends out. That would be a cool thing. I'm not even saying that we're talking about doing that, but just homebrewers in general, that's something that would be cool about the NES. Even though you can only fit so much, there's nothing stopping you from making multiple projects. And then with like bootloader software that people are having now, you could, have a flash memory card on a game pack that plugs into the NES, and you could have a bootloader that loads different games. What is it? Retro USB, I think that's the name of the site. Retro USB has one of those that you can buy, and it's just an NES cartridge that takes a SD card, and you load up your games on there. It's got a bootloader, and you just play pick the game you want, play it actually through actual hardware. So, there's so many cool things.
Oh yeah, there's tons of a billion directions you guys can go, and you obviously need to pick, your dozen absolute wish list, and then probably refine it down to less than that as you go.
And we're sorting that out through the Kickstarter, and we're kind of gauging what people are interested in seeing. And I'm actually surprised more people are interested in seeing a pixel adventure for the PC than are seeing a 3D game for the PC. I don't know if that's just because we are categorically attracting NES fans, so they like the 8-bit aesthetic, or if there's just more of a desire to see that kind of game. I'm not sure, but whatever the case, the fans that have supported it so far have been more interested in seeing a pixel adventure. So
it's going to be different. I think there's only been one big pixel adventure game in 3D Dot Heroes, I believe, for the PS3.
Mm-hmm.
I can't think of anything else in the last decade that really took that, just going with pixels and purposely going with pixels. And just having a grand adventure with it. We've seen Flash games. There's maybe a couple things on mobile devices, but nothing really that had that throwback feel to it.
The only project I could think of was from the Yacht Club guys recently with Shovel Knight. They did awesome. They rocked it, and people really dug it. They thought it was a great game. So, very cool guys, by the way. They have been super supportive of this project. So I cannot say enough cool things about Yacht Club games. Shovel Knight, get it, buy it. It's awesome. And they were hugely inspired by Zelda 2, which started this whole ridiculous adventure. So just bringing full circle of relevance back to the earlier story.
Absolutely, that's what life is. Just
there you go.
Big circle of everything.
Yeah, man.
The smallest little details from childhood affect who we are as adults. It's the coolest thing to realize. Oh man, I used to love this as a kid, and then just see how it domino effects to where we are now once you stop and actually think about it. It's definitely cool, and glad somebody's kind of doing a thing based on what they wanted as a kid. That's just awesome.
And that's another. I mean, that's another slant to the project too. And some people, that's the part they're really interested in, is just seeing. It's sort of inspiring to them because, I always wanted to do that too. Like, that's really cool that somebody's actually doing that. Everyone I know, like so many people, they used to sketch out their own games as kids.
Yeah.
And they've lost them and they forgot what they were about and everything like that. And they're like, it's so cool. So I'm hoping that some people still have held on to that stuff and, end up downloading or getting the resources that we make available on how we made our game. And then there's like a little renaissance. That's what we're hoping. I want to play more NES games. I think that'd be great. I'd love to have a reason to actually have my NES hooked up in my living room, like to, play new NES games and be excited about new actual hardware playable NES games. And we're hoping that this kind of prompts other people to, I'm going to make my game. Woohoo! And,
Yeah, one of the rewards on your page was, they can give you the designs on it and you're going to make it.
That's a high-end reward. We do have,
that's a very high-end reward. But I mean,
because obviously, because obviously it would take a lot of effort to put that game together. But yeah, I'd love to work on another NES game directly following, based on what we've learned through this process. And there have been a couple people who have been interested. So obviously it's a huge investment, but they're interested for There's one guy who has a company that does a lot of merchandise that's 8-bit inspired and 8-bit themed and retro gaming themed, and he thought that he spends a lot of money on advertising per year, a lot more than that. So this would be a great advertisement that people would actually seek it out instead of it just like flashing up on their screen on a Facebook and they just ignore it. They'd actually want to find this, and so so there are people that are interested in that. But aside from that, as rewards too, there's a set of tutorials on how to make, how to program for the NES and stuff like that. And there's even basically our entire development kit for people who pledge $250. We are going to get a version of all the tools that we use, from the hardware that we use to flash to the games, to a blank cartridge that they can start messing around with, to our tools used to make name tables and design levels and to make our collision tables, and a set of tutorials on how to use those tools to actually, at the end, there you go, you got your game. So even for less of a buy-in, if somebody wants to put in the effort and learn it on their own, we can make that happen too.
Yeah, and I mean, it was cool. Normally Kickstarter rewards, you go through and you see, the T-shirt, copy of the game, meet the developer, those sort of things that, yes, they are cool, but some of the crap you put in is just not crap. It's freaking awesome. And it was cool reading through that list, just going, oh man, I'd have never thought to put this in here. And it was awesome.
I love that we hooked up. Like, it's funny, we have the custom NES guy going to design custom NES consoles, on order. So if anyone pledges that reward tier, they're going to get a custom refurbed NES that's themed for the game. And it's funny because everyone on the team were the first people like, dude, I got it. I want it. Give me that. That'd be awesome. And so, that's fun. I thought that was one of the more, everyone asked when we were about to launch, I don't have an NES. Are you guys going to offer an NES? And I'm like, yes, we are. We are going to offer an NES. So,
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's definitely one of the more interesting Kickstarters, to me. There's so many out there that are just like, yeah, I want to make a game, so give me money. Yours is you want to help build the community as well as make a game. And
thanks. And I think that's one of the reasons why we decided. We had a big conversation the Saturday before we launched the Kickstarter. Everyone who was involved, we got together for the first time, and like all either via Skype or at my house here, and we talked about what is the main deliverable here. Is the main deliverable the game or the documentary? And we decided that the main deliverable, by a small margin, but the main deliverable is the documentary, not the game. Our purpose here is to show the homebrew community and to show the process of what went into these NES games, and to show that it's still a viable art and it's still got its beauty, and it's still, just because it's more simplistic, working within those limitations and those constraints is a beautiful science, is a beautiful art. And so we decided, the documentary is the main deliverable, not the game. And I don't know. I think that's something that a couple of people have noticed in the same regard. Like, that's really cool that you're focusing more on the documentary than the game. It's not just to help us make our game. It's we want to show this community. We want to show people and expose them to the fact that this is happening.
Yeah, and if you make the documentary the focus, you still have to have a good game for the documentary to be
Exactly.
worthwhile in the end. Because I mean, if you guys, create the next DT, nobody's gonna really want to watch the documentary.
The engine I have is already better than ET, so I feel good about that. The skeleton, yeah, exactly. The skeleton engine that I have of my character walking around the screen and running into things is better than ET was. So I can at least rest on that, satisfaction. Yeah, and we basically that's kind of what we did. Hey, we're going to make this documentary. We could release the game. Hey, we're going to make this game. Why don't we show people how we did it, and let them make their own games if they want? And that's what's awesome about the development community. I thought for sure when I started thinking about this like 6 months ago, I thought for sure the development community was going to be a bunch of jackasses. I thought they were going to be really pretentious, guarded, and just really uptight and not welcoming. Oh my God, complete opposite. I'll post on the NES Dev forum like, hey, I was trying this and I didn't. How does this work? Because I'm not getting it. Within minutes, I'll have a response from some of the moderators, and they're so cool. Like they'll go way out of their way to help. And I thought that was really inspiring. So I don't know. I like that. I really want to support them because I have not had one trollish comment on a NES Dev forum, and that is just incredible. That's incredible.
That's insane.
I know.
I mean, I've talked to a bunch of people who created, actual games during the NES era, and a lot of them said, outside of maybe the coders, but the graphic design people, the story writers, the sound people, all that have all said how collaborative the community was back then compared to now. It's like you're not allowed to be friends with somebody who works at another company. And
right.
It's cool to see that camaraderie from the NES era still shows up with the NES devs.
And if we end up hearing that a lot from some of the creatives that did work back then when we're doing the documentary, I think that'll be a really interesting thing to include. I think that the harshest comment that I've gotten so far in Nintendo Age was somebody who backed the project and said, I'm really excited for this project. I'm just really worried about you with this year deadline. Have you thought about extending the deadline? And that's like the harshest criticism. That's like, ooh, this guy's really pissed off. So yeah, it's very, very supportive. We're really interested to see what some of those guys who worked in it during the heyday have to say. Like, part of the documentary is going to see our artists going out to San Francisco and meeting up with Mark Erickson, who worked on a bunch of box art and labels and NES promo posters and stuff, and just to see how art for games has evolved. Not just in a technological way, but just in a manner of approach. Because when you were designing art concepts for an NES game, if someone gave you a concept, you knew eventually it was going to turn into 16 by 16 pixels. So, you had to really consider that. Now you're given a concept, you make a piece of concept art, they're going to build it exactly like you make it. They're going to ask you to put it in bind pose, and they're going to model it to that spec, And so it's really interesting seeing the different approach. I don't know. I think it's fascinating.
Oh yeah, I love seeing the evolution of gaming type stuff where they have people who actually did just back then, just now, and people who have gone the whole gamut.
Right.
And just seeing the different opinions on how gaming is, it's just so cool. And,
yeah.
I'm glad to see somebody's going back and, it almost feels like you're making this game in that era. You just have to be doing it with a crap ton of cooler toys.
Yeah, and that's exactly the goal. And that's one of the things that came up too. So here's one of the conundrums. I'm going to give you like an idea of some of the things that we're facing. So we want this to be an authentic 1987 experience but the NES still had like 6 years of life after 1987. And people found all kinds of ways to sort of hack the NES to do things and built different mappers and things like that. that were capable of more. So we have to make that decision. Do we be purists and use the MMC1 mapper, which was the prominent mapper from 1987 in games like Metroid and The Legend of Zelda and things like Kid Icarus and games like that were MMC1? Or do we cheat and use the MMC3, which was the most popular NES mapper, which was like Super Mario Bros. 3 and a lot of later games? And the differences being, with the MMC1, you only have 256 kilobits of data, program data that you can do, and only 128 kilobits of graphical data that you can use. Whereas in the MMC3, you have double that. So it's like, we want to make the coolest game we can, so obviously we want to go for the most. Or, wait, are we trying to stay to the constraints that we're setting? So there's this really interesting discussion about that too, and what would be the benefits and, how, I don't know. It's a crazy conversation. What would your opinion on that be?
Mine would be, oh man.
Because it comes down to, if we're trying to make the greatest gaming experience that we possibly can for the player, we wouldn't be making an NES game anyway.
Well, yeah.
So
if you're gonna go to the throwback, do you, like you said, be a purist and go with, the 1985 dev tools that Nintendo used, or the stuff closer to when the Super Nintendo came out, stuff there. What is really what we as gamers remember? Do we remember the first Mario better than the third Mario? Do we remember the first Final Fantasy? I guess technically we didn't see the next one to the Super, but
something else that was interesting too. I had a long conversation with Brian from V-Blank Games, who did Retro City Rampage, and we had a really good chat about 2 weeks ago. One thing that he said was, Retro City Rampage on the NES is a pretty advanced game for the NES. I don't know if you played it or checked it out at all, but for the NES limitations, it's intense. But he got all kinds of flack because they wished his game was more like this other pixel game that's for a computer, which even exceeds the Super Nintendo capabilities, but because it's made in pixels, it must be a retro game. It must, like a lot of players. There's a very limited demographic that really understands the difference between a game that's made with pixels and an NES 8-bit game for real. So it's crazy. I don't know. We're going around in circles with that exact conversation right now, and we got to figure it out in like 2 weeks. So
that's a hard choice to make, because if you go pure, original NES, you're limiting yourself quite a lot. And if you start to say, okay, we're going to go pure, but then not on this,
but
you're no longer pure. And so it's very, can we water that pure down just a little?
Yep. You completely understand.
Having the landslide come.
You completely understand this conversation that we're having. Yeah, how do we say, we could cheat on that a little bit, I don't know. It's crazy. It's a very, very funny conversation to have.
Oh, I can imagine everybody wanting, because the purists, that's it. Yeah. And anybody who's not a purist is against that. It's just, I can see that argument.
And I look at games like Metroid and The Legend of Zelda and things like that, and I say to myself, you know what? If we make a game that it's probably not going to be as advanced as those games, because those games are freaking awesome if you go back and play them still to this day.
Absolutely.
And there's only a couple of programmers on this, and we are not as versed in assembly language as the programmers were in Japan in the heyday of the NES. But fortunately for us, we have a lot more resources at our disposal that they didn't have. So it's kind of like this balancing act. If we can create something as sort of I don't know, and engrossing as that is, as compelling as one of those games, I'd be happy. I'd be happy if it was in that style, even though it didn't have the breadth or the length of play or the graphical capabilities of later NES era games. If I made something that was as deep as like a Metroid or Legend of Zelda, I'm fine with that, dude. Like, that would be awesome for me. That would be everything that this game should be.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where I'm sitting on the conversation. But I'm hearing my artists out on it. They want to make more cool art that we won't be able to fit in that So
Yeah,
that's the problem.
they want a bigger playground.
Yep, they want a bigger playground. I keep trying to tell them, well, that's what the companion game is for. We can do whatever we want with it. You want to make a million levels? We'll have enough. We'll have enough memory. We can make that happen. So we'll see. We'll see how that plays out.
Gosh dang it! I really need to write these questions as I think of them. I mean, I think of them and you're talking, and I'm trying to listen, and then it's like, stop talking. I can ask. Oh crap! I just forgot it.
That's the problem. I talk too much. That's okay.
We all. I'd rather you talk than me because you know more about the project than I do.
This is true. I hope so, anyway.
Oh God, what was it? I feel so blonde right now. Crap. How big is your team? Or the official team?
Yeah, the core team is 9 people. The core team is made up of myself, who will be handling the programming. This is you'd call this the core team for the game. Okay. Myself, who's doing the programming, the lead programming. The hardware developer is actually pretty versed in assembly too, so he'll be helping with some of the programming and doing some of the hardware stuff. Then we've got a illustrator, we've got an animator, we've got a graphic designer, we've got a narrative developer, we've got a film score composer, we've got a marketing rep, we've got a pixel artist. I think that's everybody. So it's really like one person to focus on all parts of the project. And then as far as the documentary team goes, the illustrator and I are actually both filmmakers as well. And we've actually worked on film projects before. And we've worked on game projects before. This was just like, we have to do this project together. It'll be awesome. And so, he's going to help a lot with that. And that's the core team. And as far as the extended team, there's like 80 people. Like, it's like everybody and their mother wants to help contribute in some way to the project. And we're like, awesome. Yes. Cool. If we don't like it, we won't use it. Is that okay with you? Yep. Okay, cool. Let's do it. You can help. So we've got all kinds of musicians that want to help, contribute to the soundtrack. We've got artists who want to submit monster ideas. And, we've got people who, work in the industry. We've got a buddy at Blizzard who, he obviously doesn't have a lot of time to commit to the project, but he wants to be a part. So it's like, hey, dude, do a monster sketch for us, give us a concept, and if we dig it, we'll fit it into the game. So we got a lot of people like that, too, that might be doing, helping us for a weekend or whatever. And the same thing with the documentary team. There's a lot of, that'll be helping us. So it's a pretty big team. There's just sort of 8, besides me, there's 8 core members besides me.
Okay. That sounds... I'm just imagining a certain artist at Blizzard drawing things for this game, and my mind was just blown. So, not going to mention any names because I don't want to be wrong. But my god,
you'd be wrong. It's not somebody that you'd probably know, but it's somebody. Okay. It's somebody I know that works there. So,
okay,
just somebody I've met through my travels, and we've met a lot of cool people, a lot of cool design studios that are named design studios, and if they can, they want to help. And some of them, the companies are totally cool with them putting their names on it and saying where they're from, and some of them are not. We've also got a couple people involved in the film part that have pretty big names attached to them that at this point we cannot divulge. So that kind of sucks because it would help, but that's okay. The Kickstarter's going good. I'm not worried about it. But their involvement is going to help it definitely get some legitimacy and visibility. So I don't know how much you're actually broadcasting this, or how much you're recording this to broadcast, or how is this working right now exactly?
I started just doing a desktop record through my graphics card.
Okay.
Basically, when you called me, and obviously we're going to edit out me forgetting to turn on my allow microphone and webcam button. But and I mean, Gerald normally goes through and edits any of the dead air, things like that out.
Sure. Well, when we're stopped,
we'll send you a copy before we post it so that you can okay it. So cool. I mean, that part of it won't be an issue, but
it's totally fine. When we're stopped, I'll give you a little bit more info about what I was just talking about. Some of the things I can't talk about right now.
Yeah.
And that way, it's not just like I'm saying these things and they don't, they don't mean anything. It's true. There's some cool stuff happening. I promise.
Yes, I believe you. So the documentary, has it actually started? Is the Kickstarter time going to be part of it? Have you done stuff before? Or is nothing going to start until
there's
18th?
There's footage that possibly could be used, but I'm thinking the close of the Kickstarter campaign, which is midnight on the 17th, is when we turn on the camera. Okay. I just think that there's a novelty to that, and start the ticking clock.
Yes.
And then we could always show some of the other stuff in flashback. But there's some really cool stuff that's happening right away. It looks like Retro Game Con wants me to panel in Syracuse, and that's pretty close to my hometown. And that's pretty much, that's like 2 weeks after the Kickstarter. So me going on a pilgrimage home to where I found all these and designed these games, and some of the places are inevitably going to be inspired by local locations and stuff. That will be cool. That'll be a cool trip to film. And Elizabeth, the fantasy novelist, will be going back to England just after the Kickstarter ends for a family thing, and she's going to actually take some time and sort of get re-inspired while she's in Europe. And what a great place to go to be inspired to create a fantasy narrative. So we've got a film team that's actually in the UK that's gonna sort of follow her around and see her process and find where she grew up and stuff like that. So right as we launch, there's some pretty cool filming opportunities that are coming up. But we have rolled a couple of things, but I think that honestly the documentary starts at midnight, on the 17th or 18th or whatever.
Like a 10-second countdown. Yeah, I mean, yeah. I can see. That sounds pretty cool. Do you have a hope of how long the documentary itself is going to be?
It'll be a
10 minutes, 10 hours.
A 90-minute documentary.
Okay.
We've already got a pretty interesting, essentially we are making an adventure game. We are all, three of the people on this documentary team are novelists. We understand story structure. We understand epic scale story structure and the hero's journey. And we've all studied Joseph Campbell and, all this stuff. And so we want the documentary to be interesting in that way, even for somebody who's not necessarily into retro gaming and things like that. Obviously, people who are into that will be more interested in what we're doing, but we want it to be a compelling narrative, not just a talking heads documentary. So there's a pretty compelling hero's journey arc that we're sort of outlining, and you can almost imagine it if I am the young hero in this fantasy story, and these are all sort of my party of characters that are helping to see this world saved from oblivion. That's the general premise of the story. That is the premise of the documentary. We are trying to save a world that otherwise, if we do not finish, will be cast into oblivion. And so there's this fantasy metaphor that's happening, and we each sort of have our own thing to overcome. Our fantasy novelist has to deal with the fact that we might not even use dialogue in the game. She might have to be able to convey her epic tale that she's going to want to tell using only visual. Yeah. So, she's going to have to go back and look at games but games do it. Look at Journey. Journey was beautiful. Journey was a gorgeous game, and there's not a single word in it. There's no voice acting. There's no dialogue. So, a game like Limbo, the same thing. These are beautiful games. And so she's going to be looking at that, on how to do that. Our score composer, same thing. He's going to build this beautiful, epic, lush score. We're going to Video Games Live with him, and we're going to study all these games being orchestrated. And then we got to work the other way. He's got to figure out how to sort of create that same vibe with, 2 square waves, a triangle wave, and a noise channel. That's all you get. So we all have these arcs, and through those arcs, we're going to meet people in the community. So our artists are going to meet Mark Erickson, who has done this before, and he becomes their Obi-Wan. He becomes the wise old sage who understands. There's an obvious question. What comes first, the concept art or the pixel art when you're designing for an NES game? I honestly don't know. I don't know what came first back then. I don't know if they made little tiny creatures and then said, oh yeah, it's kind of this octopus-looking thing that's red and, make something like that. I don't know. I don't know, or if it worked the other way around. And so it'll be interesting to hear those stories, and our artists will sort of be finding that out. We'll be finding it out along with them. And I don't know, it's stuff like that. Like, so the documentary becomes pretty easy to extend to at least 90 minutes and still be interesting. You know, it's not just somebody sitting around going, in my day, video games were like this. You know, there's actually a narrative to it.
Yeah. Are you going to have, obviously you're going to shoot more than 90 minutes because you have to, because things get screwed up. Are you going to show some of that obvious cut footage or things 6 months down the road, we're not going to use this? Are you going to throw some of that stuff up on like your Facebook page or something like that? You don't know.
Yeah, that's possible. There also might be, I mean, again, this is all things that we have planned that I don't feel comfortable promising, so I don't usually feel comfortable announcing or saying them. Yeah. But there might be things like, if you beat both games, it unlocks bonus footage from the film that's also stored on that flash drive that you can then watch in something that will pop up and see bonus footage. You know, so there's ideas like that that have floated around too, but until we're much farther in the process, I don't feel comfortable like saying, oh yeah, and we're going to do that. You know, like it's just, we can do that. I'm positive. Will we have enough memory on the thumb drives to do that, you know, and make the game that we want to make? And there's all kinds of issues with that too. And I know that there's hackers that are going to be able to hack into the game and unlock things without playing the NES game. And they're going to think they're so smooth. And I'm like, cool. Go for it, man. If you're that into playing the game and unlocking that stuff, dude, we won. You go do what you want to do. You know, that's
enjoy the game how you want. Absolutely.
Yeah. So consider it your game genie. I don't know. You know.
Oh man, I miss those days.
Right.
My favorite was, speaking of Zelda 2, Game Genie. There was a code that made you invulnerable.
Okay. And, that would have helped.
Yeah, I don't know. I was probably like 8 or 9. I probably was younger because it was my dad playing. And by the time I was 6, I was probably stealing the controller from him. But I gave him the Game Genie code wrong. I switched the last letter from an E to an A, and it took you from being completely invulnerable to getting killed in one hit. And he's going through the section where the guys are up on what looks like a fence and just throwing
throwing the rocks at you. Yeah, throwing the rocks at you.
And that's the only reason he needed the invulnerability code. And I gave him the one-hit de-killed code. He was just so furious going over and over.
It's the part right after that, the road to the Great Palace. That is the worst thing ever. It is the most obnoxious section of any game that has ever existed ever in the face of the earth. It is so hard, and so like you've gotten through this whole game, and it hasn't been all that hard. It's been challenging, but like you can manage, you can get through. But this part, oh, forget about it. Like that's the part that killed us. We kept throwing the controllers across the room, and we were 28 years old. We weren't kids anymore.
Yeah. That game. Sorry.
Yeah, man.
Everything comes back to Zelda 2.
Yep.
So, what are your hopes for the game for me as the player? Is it going to be? Do you want me to beat the game? Do you want me to just enjoy the game at my own pace? Do you want me to beat it in a sitting? What are your hopes for me as the player?
Yeah, I want you to be able to explore a new 8-bit world. I want to create an experience that prompts your desire to explore this world the same way that I think the 8-bit Zelda did for me and my friends when I was a kid. It was, you wanted to beat it and find the next. It was just fun to find stuff. It was just fun to adventure around the world and try bombing every wall and burning every bush and just see where the secrets were and things like that. And I want to sort of create that experience a little bit where
took all your rupees and then you were really mad at it.
Right. And I want it to be sort of have that open world feel where there's a couple concepts that we're toying with that we've liked but haven't figured out exactly how to implement within the constraints. But where you have something that you should go do. There's a cue that's telling you, okay, go do this thing, but you might decide I want to be stronger before I go do that thing. So I'm going to explore the world a little bit and find these other things that, and I don't want to give too many details yet, but, we want to encourage that sort of sense of exploration. So yeah, probably once somebody knows where everything is and how everything plays, they could probably beat it in a sitting. They could probably just like, I've seen speed runs of Zelda in like 38 minutes, the whole game. Yeah, it's ridiculous. But most people will take a couple days and play through and, a little bit at a time. And that's kind of the game that we're trying to make.
Okay, that's good. I mean, I was worried that it was going to be one of those games that, you put it in the first time and you just go smash the face out of the game and you're done with it. So it sounds like there's going to be more to it than just point A to point B.
There have been, good. Yeah, and there have been a couple ideas to at least make it a game that you want to replay a couple of times. There are some very subtle real-time strategy elements that we sort of wanted to squeeze in that would make the game very different every time you play it, at least for the first couple times that you play through it. And it would give you curiosity to try playing the game a different way. We really love, like, everybody on the team thinks that these are brilliant ideas, and then it comes down to what we have to sacrifice in order to make those things work. And that's our main sort of conundrum, like what do we have to lose, and that's what sucks about designing for the NES. Everyone had amazing ideas of what they wanted to do back in the day, but they're limited, so we have to work within the constraints. Can we do those? So again, I don't want to talk too much about them because they might end up by the wayside, but eventually we'll release all of our living design documents and everyone will know all the ideas that we have for the project. So.
And then some of them can make it to the multi-platform version.
Right, and then somebody else will make, some fan game which destroys our version,
But if there's that much interest in it, that's the point of the documentary. So you're happy. You're probably even happier if somebody goes and makes your game look like rubbish by making it better.
Yeah, I would thoroughly enjoy that. You're hearing me say it now. I would never begrudge someone taking a game and making a fan game and making something that makes ours look like a piece of crap. I would think that was awesome, and I'd probably be the first one to buy a copy. So
they'd hopefully send you a copy.
I would hope so, yeah. And talking about that, I don't know if have you ever seen anything about Zelda Outlands?
No, I have not.
It's a ROM hack of Zelda, the original Legend of Zelda, and I actually met the guy when we were doing the Zelda documentary up in Atlanta. Really cool guy, really nice guy, and he put a lot of time in it. And it is for a ROM hack, it is incredible. And he did it because it was fun. It was like nerd project. He'd come home on weeknight and dabble with it, and every day for a couple of years, and made this really cool. Everything's in different places. It's a whole new storyline. There's new music. There's new monsters, and it's a really cool project. And apparently, a couple of years after he made the game, someone tracked him down and sent him a copy of his game on a gold cartridge. And he had just made a ROM. Like, he didn't, he never made a game that meant to be playable on hardware. He was just having fun with it. And he found out that there was a site selling his game for $50 a pop. Flashing into a cartridge and selling it like as a rare unreleased NES game and stuff like that. So that's kind of funny. He's like, I've never seen a dime from it. I think it's hilarious, but I just did it for fun. So
yeah, sometimes those are the best projects, though.
Yeah. Those passion projects, you have something you're vested into them,
Because when you do a 9-to-5 thing 5 days a week, you get bored, you get lazy. Whereas with you guys, you're gonna have time to do it while it's still fun. Yeah, there's gonna be down moments of it. That's just how life is. But it's not gonna be, 3/4 of the project where you're angry at it. It's gonna be 3 days over the course of a year. So you guys definitely have the advantage, and you're always going to want to make it the best game possible, and never going to have that day of, I wish it was done.
And there's not too many cooks in the kitchen, There's not like 20 artists building sprites.
One person
right, exactly. It's like every person sort of is their department, and so the artists have a vested interest in the art as a whole. Like there's not like my character was awesome in that game, so there's this I don't know, there's definitely like this sort of unification where the cogs just fit together just right, and I think that's really cool too. It's not this giant assembly line type project. Everyone's part is integral. If one person does not hold up their end, the entire project starts to crumble. So that's both creates great dramatic tension for the documentary, and helps keep everyone accountable. It's cool.
Yes, definitely. I love following smaller projects because you get shit done.
Yeah.
Most of the time.
Yeah.
Whereas, Blizzard just canceled Titan.
Right.
Just.
Yep.
I can't even remember how many years ago I knew about that, and it's done, just gone, bye.
Sure.
Whereas, their smaller project, Hearthstone, got off the ground in, I think they only spent like 8 months working on it before the first version started coming out for people to toy with. So I like smaller projects.
Yep.
In general.
Yep. Me too.
Yes.
Definitely.
Big ones make bigger money, but that's not what it's always about. It's about the adventure.
Yeah, we won't see a dime on this project, and we don't mind. I'd love to shop this to festivals because I think there's audiences that would be really interested in a documentary about the homebrew scene. But honestly, we want the story to get out there, and then whatever happens with it is awesome. Anything that happens with it is awesome. We're not even thinking really business model for this, which is really irresponsible for us. I'm a filmmaker for a living. I understand that this is not the way you approach this sort of project. But for this project, it seems the right way to approach the project. So we're just going with it,
Yeah. As long as I see a game in a year and 2 weeks, 3 weeks, I'll be good.
Yeah, a year and 3 weeks. Come on now, don't cut us short. We're going to be working to the deadline. I guarantee it. Especially
17th with 5 minutes. Go switch that pixel from red to blue.
All right. Well, we got to make sure that it works on like a PAL system. We got to make sure that we got to try it on the clone systems. There's all kinds of stuff to get working. So
they didn't have to worry about as much back then. Oh man,
right.
More problems. Thank you, technology.
Well, and hey, half of our audience is from the UK so far. I'd say almost half the backers are from out of the States. So we got to make sure that it works on all those systems, Japanese systems, PAL systems, and the US NES systems.
Yeah.
Woo!
That's going to be fun.
Yeah. So that's just one. That's my hardware guy's job. That's he's the guy who's got to figure out why. If I've got to program something differently, fine. But he's got to be the one to find that information out and test it. And if it's not working, figure out why.
So one of the things that I was joking with Rob McCallum about after the interview was collector's edition with a cloth map and a gold card, all that stuff that we just remember being cool. Mm-hmm. Are those things you guys have? You don't have to tell me the end of the discussion, but are they things you have discussed?
Yes. The quote unquote $200 ultimate collector's package is going to come with a little strategy guide and maps and all that cool stuff. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. So, which is just, it's almost exactly what you just described. We're hoping that people who don't have the strategy guide can play through our game because there's not a strategy guide like there was back then. Like, we're not going to be in any Nintendo Power magazine, So
the magazine spread of every level. God, I miss those.
Right, exactly. So there's not that opportunity. So we want to make the game pretty intuitive. But that for the people that loved that. I still have my Dragon Warrior 4, my maps and all that stuff. I just love to have it, and so for the people who love that part of it, definitely, I think that'd be amazing. And that would be actually really neat to have it printed on cloth. I never even thought to screen print it on cloth. That would be pretty awesome. And I don't see why that would not be possible. So you just might have introduced how we're going to do that for the super awesome backers.
Nice. My parents played because I was born in '82, so some of this is still really little for.
Right.
But I found probably what was it? I want to say when Wind Waker came out, they had the pre-order bonus, and it had the original game. I found my parents' hand-drawn maps of the original Zelda.
Oh yeah.
With my dad played and my mom made the maps, and it's got every enemy that's in the room, where every key is, where every heart piece is, for every dungeon, and
Yep.
then just and in general, like she had 4 quadrants and gave it where all the heart pieces in the world were. Bomb this. I mean, it was just like,
Yeah.
holy cow! They don't make strategy guides like this anymore. Other
No,
than
and yep,
first
and
hand drawn versus printed, but it's just so cool.
well, and I actually just found some of my old Zelda stuff, and yeah, it actually has. The game came with basically a tutorial on how to make maps.
Yeah.
Like how, like you're the explorer. Here's how you can make a map, so you can, you can remember where everything is. And that was just revolutionary. I mean, that was just something that, wow, this is so cool. It is this huge world, and it's so hard to remember. You are the adventurer. You're the explorer. You got to make the map. So we might provide something like that in this too, just because we kind of want that feeling of, oh, this epic world, and by today's standards, people are going to look at it and be like, this is a joke. It's so small, whatever. It's only X amount of screens big, but so the people who get it will get it. People who don't will never understand, and that's okay. We're okay with that.
Yeah, I mean, the first Zelda, we all thought that world was huge.
Yep.
It was like, how am I ever going to see every screen of this game? And then when you finally did, and you knew you had everything memorized, you could just blow through the game in a sitting. You were like, this is awesome.
Yeah.
And you don't get that feeling anymore because you go and the game is 100 hours long, and you sit with game FAQs up on a second screen,
right,
telling you what to do the whole time, and you're not really playing the game. You're just
and
following instructions.
I'm praying that doesn't happen, and I don't think it will. I want to. Okay, this is an interesting little anecdote. So I was telling you about that little game, that little web game that I made for the Zelda movie site.
Okay.
And I did that as kind of like a novelty. It's a game that you walk around and it plays just like a Zelda game. You get a sword, you fight monsters, and the monsters have clever names like Lauyers, liars, and they have fines and fees that they attack you with. There's these little snake creatures, or like Sinnix, cynics, who are trying to stop the film from being made. Little inside jokes and things like that. But you play around this world, and there's like 3 bosses to fight, and if you beat them all, you basically unlock the magic DVD, and you walk over to it, and it plays a clip from the documentary. And I just did it as a novelty because I thought, oh, this would be fun, and then everyone will talk about it, and people will go to the site. But people got into it. Like, there was a whole like blogging back and forth. How do you do this? I can't find where this is. I'm like, dude, this is a game I made over a weekend. It was just a novelty. Calm down, And so on the one hand, I say no one's going to take it to that level with this game that we're making for the NES. But then I don't know. Maybe they would. I definitely didn't think they would take it to that level with that game. That game was kind of a joke. So I don't know.
Never know how fans are going to react.
Right?
Especially the extreme ones. Yeah.
So we will see. I'm hoping for that level of like people designing strategy guides But yeah, I totally know what you're saying. Like back then when you didn't have the group, your support group was you called your buddy on your friend. How do you do this? I can't find this. And he would tell you, or he'd come over and you'd figure it out together. And that was cool, man. Like that was really neat. And that was a whole different type of social gaming,
Yeah. I miss some of that because now it's like you just go, oh, let me look this up, fine, and goes from there.
Here, meet my dog. She's gonna come and say hi. Come on. Okay, this is Georgia.
Hello, Georgia.
She's the boss. She always comes in whenever Morgan comes and sits right here as the boss.
Well, probably the best seat in the house.
Yeah. Good dog.
I don't know if I have any more questions.
Cool, man. Well, it's been a marathon, so it's been 1 hour and 23 minutes. So that's awesome, man. I really appreciate you taking the time.
Hey, I love this type of stuff. I mean, I'm sitting here just geeking out listening to it, and then it's like I have to. Oh crap! Ask a question. Oh, where'd that question go? Yeah, I love this stuff.
Well, I will gladly keep you updated on the progress, man, as we go. And if you ever want to check in and just find out like what ridiculous part of it we're on or what we're doing, feel free to check it anytime.
Yeah, absolutely. Gerald loves posting these smaller stories because they get more views than some of the bigger stuff.
Sure.
Because everybody covers the bigger stuff. So
right.
Definitely cool for us to talk to somebody like you who's making something that we all feel is awesome. So
thanks, man. I'm glad. It's good to have you guys support.
Did you want to throw out your social media? I mean, I'll type it out to
sure.
look with it, but all your how to find you things?
Honestly, best way to find us, if you go to www.the new8bitheroes.com.
You need
right now that'll lead right to...
You just started echoing, so we heard like 12 W's.
Oh, okay. If you go to www.the new8bitheroes.com, right now that'll take you to our Kickstarter for the duration of the campaign. When the campaign ends, it'll lead back to a website and a production blog. And facebook.com/the new8bit heroes, or on Twitter it's just new 8bit heroes. I know that there's a Pinterest and a Tumblr and a Instagram. I don't know what they are. My marketing person handles all that, so I don't know what they are, but I'm sure if you search Pinterest the new 8bit heroes, you'd find it.
Okay. I'll find it and get links up for it.
Awesome.
Thank you very much. This is Aaron, OSU Water Polo with YourGameSource.com, talking with Joe from the new 8-Bit Heroes. Thank you very much for your time, sir.
Cool. And if you press the stop button, I'll tell you a little bit about that thing that I was talking about earlier.
Do you love games, breed games, and bleed games? Then this is the crew for you. If you are interested in editorial, podcasting, live events, and exclusive content, make sure to hit us up at info@yourgamesource.com and become part of a team that is dedicated to delivering all the greatest and latest in gaming news and content, all here at yourgamesource.com.